April 20th, 2024. Well, I'm going to address the ongoing situation in the Middle East. You know, my previous video there, before the one on the movie, the Civil War, I did go into this and threw out a possibility that this whole thing kind of um, didn't really come off the way that the Iranians wanted it to. And now we, of course, have the much vaunted Israeli response attack that the administration was pressing the Israelis not to do. And of course, that happens along with our ongoing saga of the Trump trial here, which has had now 4 days, and they finally selected the jury and alternates. So I might say a little bit about that at the end. But let's get on with the situation with the Middle East. I think I've been basically borne out to be correct here. That I said that I didn't think that any Israeli response would be that effective in deterring the Iranians much, or too much worth doing, because essentially to do something massive enough to really make a difference would be too much right now at the current political situation, and maybe even on the capabilities level. And therefore, what's the point of doing something that will look very unimpressive? And well, as unimpressive goes, this looks really unimpressive. I mean, even at my most negative, I thought they could do better than that. So what I think that this seems to be is a political retaliation. In other words, the Israelis felt from internal political reasons they had to do something, so they somehow conducted what appears to be maybe a drone attack on a military air base in near where the nuclear facility is in Iran, but not necessarily the nuclear facility itself. Either an anti-aircraft system around the air base, which also has F-14s that they bought way back in the day. You know, I think that was when was that? That was back in the Ford period, maybe, or maybe even the Nixon period. It was part of the idea of building up the Shah's regime was sort of a bulwark at the time, and well, that didn't go too good. But at any rate, that's what happened, and I guess it looks like for now things are over with until something happens. It looks like Hezbollah isn't doing that much. The Israeli operation in Gaza, it looks like it's pretty much over for now. There's a talk about Israel might go back and do something at Rafah, but they've pulled out and demobilized most of their army. So it doesn't look like that's really going to happen. Again, that's kind of a political thing that we'll do it, but when and how is very unclear. And right now they're trying to negotiate a hostage release that looks like maybe a good lot of the hostages are dead, either because they've been deliberately killed, died of just the deprivation of being held hostage by these people, or maybe killed by the Israeli military operation with all the bombing. So at any rate, they seem to be claiming they don't have enough to make the 40 hostage deal for the 900 prisoners. So anyway, so that's that's about it for now. It looks like we're going to go back to normal until something happens. Sooner or later, somebody will do something to get things going again. That's the way of the Middle East. As I've said in previous videos, I've been a long-term student of this, and actually, if you go back to what I've said about it, I've been pretty much right all along. I predicted that the whole operation against Hamas would end up with no victor, no vanquished. And that's what's happened, that the U.S. would eventually cease to support Israel's ultimate goal, which happened. And yet, unlike what certain detractors like these people on the Judge Napolitano show are saying all the time, no, Israel's not defeated. They're doing okay too. The game continues. So if you like these videos, please give me a like. I'm always looking for more subscriptions, and of course, I also post these on Rumble for those that don't like YouTube. If you get a hold of this by watching me, say on X or something like that, you know, you can always subscribe on Rumble as well. It's the same thing, Corrality452. So yeah, and so at any rate, but I've come to another conclusion about the Israelis and what they need to do. Is historically Israel has put a big part of their defense budget both what they spend from their own internal money and the aid they get from the U.S. And by the way, most of the Israeli military isn't U.S. aid historically. Most of it actually is domestically funded. But they've been running around, what, $3 billion and change every year for a long time. And I guess this little episode may get them a lot more money, depending on what happens in the vote in the next few days in Congress. But that's okay. But anyhow, but they definitely very much rely on the United States because they're the only reliable supplier of weaponry they get other than the things they build domestically. And even that often requires some degree of U.S. components. And so they have to kind of keep in good with good old Uncle Sam or Ellis. On the other hand, the U.S. gets a lot of advantages from Middle East intelligence out of that too. So it's kind of and nothing else, they usually make our weapon systems look good, which helps foreign sales. But anyhow, but what I'm recommending is, I think, looking at what's happened here and looking at the geographics of this, most of the historical military actions Israel has been involved in for a long time have been around local countries, historically Egypt, Syria, Jordan, Lebanon, occasionally Iraq or something like that, but rarely ever anything as far as Iran, and particularly not just the border of Iran, just by the Persian Gulf, but going into Iran, near where Tehran is, and where some of those other targets deep in Iran are, where the nuclear research and uranium enrichment processes are happening. It isn't using fighter aircraft to do this is just not the best, like I was saying, because you don't want to use these airplanes on a one-way mission. You end up losing your pilots out of it. You can't afford that. And you're going into countries that do have a fair amount of air defense, and if they're properly alerted, the Russian S-300 and 400 systems are pretty damn effective, actually. Look at what they've done to the Russian Air Force in Ukraine. They're tricky systems, and apparently even the Russians haven't developed ECM that can carry their own systems very well. So tactical aircraft is probably not the best bet. So I think and if you look at the success of the Israeli Arrow interceptors, it shows that they can produce high quality, missiles, fairly substantial ones. So I think, and of course, Israel does have their Jericho missiles, which are basically a nuclear deterrent, and they're probably pretty expensive. And so I think that, at any rate, what I think that they need to start looking at is perhaps investing more in ballistic missiles, because ballistic missiles have the advantage that they're faster, that they're hard to intercept, and you don't have to fly over neighboring countries at low altitudes where you trigger their air defenses and their sovereignty issues. You're kind of going through space, and while you can get all the technicalities of exactly high enough, they're so high there's nothing they can do about it, and very little they can say about it, and very little they know about it till it's over with, so to speak. And so I think they need some conventional missiles that are designed to hit hardened targets at distances up to as far as maybe 1,500 miles. And that would allow them to cover almost the whole target set in Iran. And by building missiles with perhaps, I'm thinking up to a 1-ton payload, which are analogous to some of the Iranian missiles, and presumably solid fuel missiles, based on some of the other missile work they've already done, and then to have kind of a hypersonic penetrator. I don't necessarily mean it has to be the kind of maneuvering thing that's usually referred to as a glide vehicle, but simply something that comes in fast. I'm thinking something more like the warheads on the old Pershing IIs that were built back in the 80s, except those were nuclear. And the ones I'm proposing would be, of course, conventional, but would have a hardened penetrator, bunker buster type warhead that could smash through into these underground facilities and then detonate, destroying them. Similar to what some of the Russians have achieved with some of their like the Kinzhal missiles that they use to do some attacks. And I would assume that, using the technology that Israel has, which is technology they also get dealing with U.S. contractors, this would be good enough to be accurate enough. It would probably need to have some kind of terminal guidance system to make the warhead maneuver in the final phase of descent to be able to really hit these things with pinpoint accuracy. GPS could also be useful to get them very close and then maybe some terminal system to really close in at the final, or maybe GPS alone would be adequate. But at any rate, that's a technical detail for the engineers to work out. But I think that developing systems like these and then building a reasonable quantity of them would be a reasonable thing for them to divert some of their this budget, maybe if they get the money they're talking about too, which give them a capability that would restore their credibility in terms of dealing with this Iranian strike. Right now, you know, they've got Ritter and people like that going, boy, Israel's in real bad trouble. And they may be, but I mean, lay low a little bit and build these systems, and then they'll be back in the game. Because anyway, that's my thought on the subject, that a system like that would give them what they need to hit these nuclear sites if they ever decide they need to do that. All right, so that's kind of my thought on that. And I've also been, like I mentioned in the beginning, I've been watching the coverage of this sham trial that they're conducting in New York on this documents case. And I've mentioned before, here on X, I've mentioned at any rate, I think that they're deliberately drawing this thing out too. I mean, most of the facts in the case are pretty much acknowledged. I mean, you know, Trump admits that yes, he did pay these two women for their silence. Whether or not they really are making a legitimate charge against them, which I guess most people believe, or he actually didn't have any relationships with them other than he met them or something. Either way, so I don't know whether he's just being, well, either way, he was being blackmailed, I guess. And so he basically, you know, paid for their silence. And then, of course, that all blew up eventually. So I don't know that. And it's pretty clear cut. Even he himself said he publicly, it's on video, where he said he paid through his attorney and then paid the attorney through the attorney's retainer. And so the only other issue might be is, well, did he tell them his accountant to put it in as a business legal expense or what? Probably yes. So the real issue, I think, on that is it illegal? And I think the answer is no, it's not. It's all made up. It's just a fake crime. And so, at any rate, we'll see how that plays out. Interesting enough, it looked like that the hearing against this obstruction of official proceeding law they've used against about 300 of the defendants in the January 6th case, it's looking to me like, we'll see for sure. It looks like the Supreme Court is about ready to strike the application of that down that was done by the prosecutors in this case. So that should be good news. That should knock off, I think, one or two of the charges against Trump in the D.C. case. And I think in the coming week, I believe it is that they're going to hear the presidential immunity case, and that is going to be really interesting to see what the Supreme Court's going to do with that, because the appellate court had pretty much had an effective ruling against Trump in this, and if you believe that, in fact, his speeches and whatever he did in that January 6th related was a reasonable presidential action, then why do they even need to hear it? It seems to me all they have to do is refuse to hear it, and they'd be good to go with the trial. So they're definitely delaying the trial here. Now, one possibility is that they'll rule in his favor. The other possibility is that they will take the case and simply not rule. Just hold the decision for months, and that will hold up the trial without actually setting a precedent. Then sometime after the election, they might rule against them, but which time it might be too late because, well, or it might rule for them, then I don't know which, but I'm just saying that's another option. I don't know which they're going to do, or whether there's 4 judges that are determined to make a statement about it, even though five are going to go the other way. That's another possibility. So that's something to look forward to, seeing how those arguments go and what those decisions go. But if they went the right way, that could completely knock out the D.C. case, I think, and also protect them against this emerging lawsuit by the Capitol police officers that got injured in the riot. So anyway, that's about it for this time. I will, of course, be posting this on both YouTube and Rumble, and the my social media accounts are in the description below. All for now.